Look at a map of North America, and the line dividing the United States and Canada looks like a triumph of modern geometry. It stretches over 5,000 miles, cutting across the continent with absolute, unyielding precision. But when you get zoomed in, that perceived precision suddenly disappears into a chaotic sequence of zigzags and surveying errors. The International Boundary Commission, the joint agency maintaining the line, knows exactly how wrong it is. Their survey teams use modern GPS to map the coordinates of the official border markers, and they have documented that thousands of these monuments sit hundreds of feet away from where the original treaties dictate. Yet the Commission doesn't move them. Instead, they enforce a strict bureaucratic rule. The border is legally defined by wherever the physical monuments actually sit on the ground, regardless of what the treaties say or what modern satellites prove. These stone obelisks and concrete markers, scattered across thousands of miles of remote wilderness, are the true, undisputed anchors of the boundary. Two modern superpower governments spend millions of dollars a year to rigorously defend a boundary line they possess hard mathematical proof is a fiction. The foundation of this fiction dates back to 1755 with the publication of Mitchell's Map. It was drafted by a physician recovering from an illness in London who relied heavily on fur trader accounts and educated guesses to draw the vast North American interior. When American and British diplomats drafted the 1783 Treaty of Paris, they used Mitchell's Map as their guide. They agreed the border would hit the northwestern edge of the Lake of the Woods, and from there proceed due west until it connected with the Mississippi River. There was a massive geographical flaw in that agreement. The headwaters of the Mississippi River actually sit far to the south of the Lake of the Woods. A line drawn due west from that point shoots endlessly into empty space. It can never intersect the river. To fix this impossibility, later diplomats agreed to drop the line straight down to the 49th parallel, but doing so created an isolated wedge of land called the Northwest Angle, a tiny block of Minnesota permanently stranded entirely above the line. Today, the American citizens living in the Angle must drive through the Canadian province of Manitoba just to reach the rest of their own country. The physical reality of their daily lives is dictated entirely by a doctor's bad map from the 18th century. The mapping errors on the East Coast were far more expensive. Following the War of 1812, the United States government spent $275,000 to build a stone fortification on Lake Champlain, intending to secure the 45th parallel against invasion. 2 years into construction, a joint survey team arrived to verify the coordinates. They discovered that the previous surveyors had measured incorrectly. The true 45th parallel was located to the south, meaning the United States had accidentally built its new military installation nearly a mile inside Canada. Rather than abandon the site or concede the territory, the two nations signed the Webster-Ashburton Treaty. They agreed to officially adopt the old and correct survey line as the permanent legal border. Because they enshrined that wallowing, zigzagging error into law, the border now cuts directly through the Haskell Free Library in Darby Line, Vermont. Patrons walk through the front doors in the United States to check out books located in Canada. The boundary bisects reading rooms and theater seats because keeping diplomatic agreements and saving military pride was ultimately more important to both governments than placing the line where it mathematically belonged. Out on the Pacific coast, ambiguous treaty language almost triggered a war. In 1846, the Oregon Treaty declared the border would run through the middle of the channel separating Vancouver Island from the mainland. The diplomats failed to realize that the archipelago actually contained two distinct channels. For a decade, both nations claimed the San Juan Islands that sat between those channels. The tension shattered in 1859 when an American farmer living on the disputed land stepped into his garden and shot a pig belonging to the British Hudson's Bay Company. American settlers requested protection, and military commanders eagerly escalated the situation. Within weeks, a small company of outgunned American infantrymen found themselves staring down 5 heavily armed British warships carrying thousands of troops. Neither side wanted to fire the first shot and start a global conflict over livestock. Instead, they settled into a bizarre joint military occupation, sharing the tiny island in an armed standoff for 12 years while waiting for an international ruling. In 1872, Kaiser Wilhelm I of Germany was selected as a neutral arbitrator. He studied the vague wording of the original treaty and awarded the islands to the United States. The British warships sailed away without a single casualty, other than the pig. But the crisis proved that a poorly written geographical definition possessed the power to drag two global empires to the absolute brink of combat. Other sections of the border were built on active deception. During the 1842 negotiations over the Maine territory, Secretary of State Daniel Webster privately held cartographic evidence that weakened the American position, and he quietly kept it hidden from the British. What Webster didn't know was that British diplomats were simultaneously hiding a secret map of their own, one that undermined Canada's territorial claims. Both sides negotiated a compromised middle line, completely unaware that the other was suppressing evidence. The tactics grew even more aggressive over the Alaska Panhandle. The vague language of an 1825 treaty left the exact width of the coastal boundary undefined, a technicality that suddenly carried immense economic weight when the Klondike Gold Rush sent tens of thousands of prospectors flooding into the region. To resolve the dispute in 1903, an international tribunal was convened, but President Theodore Roosevelt refused to leave the outcome to chance. He stacked the panel with committed American partisans, privately threatening to deploy troops if the ruling didn't go his way. The pressure worked. The tribunal ruled in favor of a massive American panhandle, aggressively blocking Canadian access to the Pacific Ocean. The decision was so clearly political that the Canadian delegates refused to sign the final document in protest. The jagged edges of the Alaska boundary remain the permanent geographical legacy of diplomatic extortion. All of these historical maneuvers culminate in places like Point Roberts, Washington. It is a suburban American town, located on a tiny peninsula that dips just below the 49th parallel, physically severed from the United States mainland by diplomats who simply drew a straight line across a map they didn't fully understand. For the residents living there, that blind cartography translates into a daily logistical nightmare. Routine tasks like driving to a mainland hospital require crossing 2 international checkpoints, a reality that completely isolated the town when the border was shut down during the COVID-19 pandemic. The International Boundary Commission understands the absurdity of Point Roberts, just as they understand the monument discrepancies in the wilderness. But they also know that fixing these geographical errors is functionally impossible. Correcting the boundary to reflect true mathematical accuracy would mean voiding 2 centuries of established property rights, mineral claims, and delicate international peace treaties. The longest undefended border in the world relies completely on a mutual agreement between 2 superpowers to accept the 5,525-mile line exactly as it sits. This line functions as a living archive of human mistakes, bad maps, and compromised negotiations, a collection of errors that both countries have chosen to honor to keep the peace.
Do both countries still keep the historical border even through modern technology? So some inaccuracies. So please guys, answer my question and thank you so much for watching. Goodbye and take care. And this question is literally very easy. So try this my question answer. And first of all, thank you so much for watching this my video. So goodbye and take care guys.